Fellas, if you missed yesterday's reveal stream, we got you covered. Today is going to be a TLDR breakdown of everything that was discussed in yesterday's Act 2 reveal stream. By the way, let me just say, these reveal streams are amazing. Just having this open dialogue between Andy and Noah, DMG, Taylor. Many of us know these names. We've seen these names around the community, but I would say starting from Into the Light to now, we've been getting a lot more FaceTime with the developers themselves. And let me just say, it's actually a blast just tuning in for these streams. So Bungie, if you're listening, please continue doing this. Now, the bulk of the stream consisted of showing off essentially the new activity that's coming with Act 2, that being Tomb of Elders. Now, a lot of us just expected, and myself included, I just expected this to be a reprisal of Prison of Elders from Destiny 1. We even had a few comments yesterday saying, oh, Bungie keeps giving us reprised content. And although I do understand where you guys are coming from, this is definitely way different from Prison of Elders. I would say Tomb of Elders drew inspiration from Prison of Elders, but that's about it. Everything else here has been reimagined. Now, there's going to be two variations of this mode. We've got Tomb of Elders, which is actually the shorter version. You can think of like Riven's Lair back from Season of the Wish. Then there's the version they are playing on stream called Contests of Elders. A lot of similarities here between this and the Coil. This is the longer version. Now, when I say longer version, we're talking like anywhere between a 30-minute commitment at the lowest end to like a 45, 50-minute commitment. Now, from Noah directly, he says that this activity is longer and more roguelike, with the main goal to make it as variable as possible so that each run feels different from the last. So again, inspiration from Prison of the Elders. You've got the Warden talking in your ear, but as far as like theme, enemy types, enemy density, mechanics, this is way different than Prison of Elders, as it should be, because to be quite frank, we are way too strong for a game mode like Prison of Elders right now. Like, we would literally run through it. Even day one Skullus right now, we would wreck. Now, it's also here where Andy asked if the goal was just to bring the activity back with the same bosses, same races, same concepts, which Noah replied, absolutely not. He explained his rule he set with this was that he wanted to keep the best parts from Prison of Elders back in Destiny 1, that being like your iconic aspects, things like dismantled mines, fan favorite bosses, which we got to see some of Urox as well as Psylocke. They also wanted to modernize this mode, not just to our current sandbox, but also the vibe of it, considering that this episode is Vampire Slayer themed. Now, this version of the mode is also going to feature different enemy factions compared to its predecessor. We'll be facing off against the Dread, which is led by Taken Forces. We also have the Shadow Legion Cabal, we've got Lucent Hive, and then of course, Revenant Scorn. Now, another difference Noah noted was back in Destiny 1, there was a rotation of modifiers which could be beneficial to you. This time around though, none of the modifiers will be beneficial, making the activity much more challenging. Now, we got to see a few of these throughout the stream. They would pop up in the middle of the screen before the encounter starts, just like they did back inside of Destiny 1. Now, one of those that we saw was called Brawn. Your health is massively increased, but does not regenerate. Defeating challenging combatants will recover health for you and nearby allies. We also got to see Chill Touch, where being hit by a melee attack slows you. We've got Counterfeit, which states when defeated, combatants can drop explosives disguised as familiar items. We've got that in the game now. Scrapper, where combatant melee attacks are significantly more powerful. And this activity is also going to feature revive tokens, which looks like you'll start with 20, and then you'll gain more by defeating these high value targets called model prisoners. Now, the cadence of Tomb of Elders is said to be pretty similar to Riven's Lair. If you remember back to last year, Riven's Lair had a trap room, an encounter, another trap room, then finally the boss room. Now, here is slightly going to be more action focused. We'll start with the cryopod encounter first, then there will be a faction encounter with a random arena themed around the faction that you're facing. You'll then have a traversal section, then finally you'll face off against a boss, and then you'll be pulled into the Warden's office, which you can collect your loot and then go back through the loop all over again. Now, each of these rooms have a main objective, whether it's to defeat combatants, collect objects, defeat bosses, etc. But then there's also a challenge for each of the rooms, with the boss room having a critical objective. Now, here in this first room, there are actually tasks to defeat combatants with special and heavy ammo, and in the next room, the challenge is to get a scorched cannon and land final blows with it. Now, under the challenge, there's a countdown timer, which sets time until Warden's Judgment. This is going to be a mechanic that dictates the amount of rewards you earn. You'll see on the top of your HUD, right under your health bar, the Warden's Judgment buff. Now, the Warden's Judgment is meant to be a way to judge how well you are doing in that activity. And this was actually introduced based on the feedback the team received from the Coil. That was because it wasn't very clear how you get to the Wish Chamber for max rewards. It wasn't exactly clear how much wishing glass you needed, and it felt pretty bad whenever you would miss the loot goblin. This buff will increase by 1 when you complete these challenges within the time limit, and it maxes out at Warden's favor times 3. And if you fail it, it will decrease by 1. Now, if you fall below the neutral point down to Warden's punishment, the activity actually gets a little bit easier by reducing the amount of elites and mini bosses and changing the high value targets called model prisoners from mini bosses down to elites. Keep in mind though, your rewards won't be as good when it does this downgrade. On the other hand, though, the better you do and the more stacks of Warden's Judgment you get, the harder the activity will be. Noah mentioned that there's going to be traps in the arenas, increased mini bosses, and if you're at ×3, the challenge timers will be reduced by about 30%, making it more difficult to keep up that Warden's Judgment ×3. So speed is definitely going to be needed to excel in this activity, which Noah also mentioned that the better you do and the faster you are, the Warden can actually let you skip encounters, with the fastest time that he saw within Bungie being around 28 minutes. Now, this is actually really cool because I don't think we've ever had a scenario in which you can skip encounters based on how well you efficiently ran the previous encounters. Now, keep in mind, 28 minutes is cooking. Not saying we won't be able to hit that. I'm sure we can. But if you look back at like the Coil, that was about a 45 to 50 minute time commitment. Now, after the 2 encounter rooms, we actually saw the team head into this traversal section before the boss, which again, similarities here between this and the Coil and Riven's Lair, but they did make the traversal section a lot quicker. They also made it more interesting. On top of that, the traversal rooms will have a challenge that's tied to them directly, which can either help you increase your Warden's favor, perhaps decrease it if you're too slow. Now, Noah also mentioned that the challenge for the traversal rooms is only for the Contest of Elders version of the game mode, not for Tomb of Elders. Now, from here, they made their way to the boss room, and something else Noah was especially excited about was that they tried to give all the bosses a cool intro. Here during the first boss, we see a Thresher lower from the sky down into the arena. And let me just say, man, arguably one of the scariest things inside of Destiny are Threshers. I literally remember them one-tapping us on Neomuna. Now, the mechanic of this is defeating Cabal and then gather these explosives to throw at the Thresher, which once destroyed, reveals the real boss, which is a big Scion. Now, Noah said that each of the factions have their own mechanic to them. The Hive use their portals in the arena. The Cabal are about using explosive charges to destroy things that are immune. The Scorn are about getting these explosive canisters and making these makeshift explosives. And with the Dread, it looks like you'll collect these darkness splinters and then you'll dunk them into a rift. Now, during this Cabal boss fight, we gotta look at one of these critical challenges. These are meant to be more difficult and dangerous than the standard encounter challenges. The critical challenge here was to activate all the energy switches to vent the poison, which requires you to jump down into the lower level of this arena, literally stepping into this poison gas and then manually turning off these switches. You'll be taking damage over time. You'll have enemies still attacking you, with the boss still very much active in the arena. Now, once the bosses are defeated, you'll be teleported into the Warden's office. This is where you'll be collecting your rewards, which actually in this case, they completed all the challenges, so they got Warden's Judgment ×3, giving them the 3 chests on top of a rally flag before they continue on. Now, moving forward in the stream, because the team did well, they actually got to skip the cryopod encounter and then head straight into the faction encounter room. Now, back in the Warden's office, the Warden will also calculate your judgment based on how well you did. On the stream, they actually did so well, it said punishment protocol averted. Now, nothing bad happened, but it seems like if your Warden's Judgment buff is in the punishment tier while you're being judged by the Warden here, a negative punishment will happen, which Noah did not spoil here for us. Now, just like in the Coil, after each loop, the activity will get more difficult. As you can see here, it pops up on the screen saying that combatant power has increased. Now, they didn't show it, but Noah mentioned that there's going to be a treasure chamber at the end, similar to the one at the end of the Coil. And again, guys, if it's like the Coil, it's going to be very rewarding to get to this point. I'm really looking forward to this activity though, guys. Looks like a lot of fun, looks challenging. I like that they describe it as being variable. Even the Coil, man, it had different mechanics, but for the most part, especially from an aesthetic sense, it was the same throughout. This actually seems to change up a whole bunch through each of these runs. Now, that's about it for the main mechanics for Tomb of Elders. And if any of this seems complicated, no worries. We'll have a guide on this when this launches next Tuesday. Now, from this point in the stream, they now moved on to talking about some of our new rewards coming with Act 2. This is where we're going to be receiving 2 weapons and 1 reprisal. First up, we have the Noxious Vetiver. This is an arc precision frame SMG, which has access to the new jolting feedback perk, which can be further paired with things like attrition orbs or loose change. We also got to see Scavenger's Fate. This is a void precision frame shotgun, which Taylor mentioned has some Dust Rock blue jeans, which was such a good shotgun back in Forsaken. Now, this shotgun can roll with things like slide shot and closing time, again, pushing it to be very much on par with what Dust Rock blues used to be inside of PvP. Now, the other side of things, we have Repulsor Brace and destabilizing rounds for my PvE players. Now, for our reprise weapon, they showed off Grid Skipper. I feel like all of these weapons I say is like one of my favorite, but let me just be real. From Chrome and Rush to Ignition Code to Grid Skipper. Dude, all of these are just really, really good weapons. This is a rapid fire pulse rifle. You can roll with things like Zim Moment and Headseeker, Killing Wind and Multi-Kill Clip. I feel like we do have a number of different rapid fire pulse rifles to choose from, but with the rolls that you can get on this version of Grid Skipper, I feel like it's going to be much better than its previous version. Now we also got to see the new row of artifact mods. This will be coming alongside Act 2, guys. In column 1, we have authorized mods, melee. The armor energy costs of all armor mods affecting your melee are significantly discounted. In column 2, we have emergency flare. This was an interesting one. It states that emergency reinforcements consume all but one armor charge. Now let's just be real, guys. Emergency flare has nothing on protective light. That was such a good mod, a must-have mod. I don't really know if this is going to change anything for us, but we'll see. In column 3, we have the thick of it. Rapid final blows while surrounded grants you armor charge. Now this mod actually has a boost, which will coincide with the new tonics that we'll be able to craft in the second act. This boost reads that while you are surrounded, your weapons have increased handling and your swords gain increased charge rates. Now in column 4, we have curative orbs. The first time you break a target shield or break the shield of a guardian using their super, you create an orb of power. This one also gets a boost, which reads that picking up an orb of power, an elemental pickup, or a tangle grants you a small amount of health. Now lastly, in column 5, we have arc compounding. Arc sources deal increased damage to blind targets. And now I have no idea how much of an increase that is, but just looking at these face value, no lie, guys, they don't really seem that potent. Like in comparison to the Act 2 rollout of those mods in the Echoes episode, those were potent. These not so much. We do have some weapons that have like a self loop there when it comes to blinding, so who knows? Maybe this might be good. That kind of just boils down to whatever percentages Bungie adds here. Now Act 2 will also be bringing us a mid-episode patch, and I'm assuming this week's TWAB is probably going to go over that patch, but one of the big changes they mentioned is that roaming supers are receiving a buff. Now this seems pretty substantial. They actually said that roaming supers are going to regenerate 2 to 3 times faster than they currently do. The idea is to move these supers closer to your neutral game and that you'll feel more comfortable actively using these supers as much as possible, considering you're going to be getting them back so much quicker. Now they did mention that this is PvE only, but they do believe that this is going to shake things up and also give players some more options during activities. I know it's kind of a weird thing because a lot of what we do with our builds these days are like really tied to our neutral game abilities, but we have some great exotics that tie into these roaming supers. Like I imagine myself after this change running around with Doom Pauldrons and Sentinel and literally just throwing shields wave after wave inside of onslaughts. Now at this point in the stream, DMG actually gave us a preview of some upcoming collabs. We actually have a Street Fighter partnership that's coming up. We got the 3 new Ghost Shells, which you can see here featuring Ryu, Chun-Li, and Cammy. There's a Blanca helmet, which can be used on all 3 classes. There's 3 new finishers consisting of the Lightning Kick, the Spinning Bird Kick, and of course, Hadouken. Now we also got emotes. One actually sees our Guardian practicing some moves against a vending machine, and there's also a 2-player emote where the characters literally face off in a Street Fighter match. They even have like a health bar above the players, which is really cool. Then we also got another collab coming with some more armor sets based on Doki Doki. Dude, nowhere on my bingo card did I think there was going to be a collab with Doki Doki. Now next we got to see a preview of the Dawning armor, which will launch December the 10th. Now this armor really shocked me. It's literally themed around celestial space dragons. We got to see the Warlock one, and fellas, no lie, it looks good. DMG mentioned that the team worked hard to make the armor shade really well, and it's going to be available for both silver and bright dust. Now as far as the event itself, it seems like it's going to be what we're used to in the past. We're going to be baking cookies. They did include some quality of life changes though, where the drop rates have been improved for all ingredients. Dawning Ingrams are also going to be returning with the ability to focus for weapons, which can drop with double perks. Now we got a classic weapons that are returning from previous years, along with a new Void Adaptive Burst Linear Fusion Rifle, which they showed the roll of, which contain Withering Gaze, Bait and Switch, along with the Vice Stinger origin traits. Now strange coins are also going to be added to the Dawning gifts, so if you're trying to go for that Zerf board, or you want some exotic class items from Zer when he's selling them, this would be another way to get those strange coins. Now I think the biggest thing that I'm anticipating outside of Act 2 is Iron Banner. And I know we're not that crazy about Iron Banner, but it's finally coming to us November the 26th. Now we're going to have a brand new armor set, which does look pretty nice, but it's the weapons I'm most excited for. We're actually getting 2 stasis weapons. The first being Tenacious Mastery, which is a stasis rocket sidearm, which can roll with Chill Club. We also have Archon's Thunder returning. It will be stasis instead of solar, and it's going to have perks like Headstone, Onslaught. We'll see how good it is, but definitely the rocket assisted sidearm That's going to be the juicer we'll be going after. Now, last but not least, the team showed off a small preview of the new exotic weapon that's coming during Act 3. Now, similar to Choir of One, this will be a reward for the Act 3 exotic mission, that being Slayer's Fang. Now, this is a void slug shotgun. It almost reminds me of like hard light and a shotgun mixed together with the way it hits surfaces and then it shatters into these projectiles. But again, it's a slug shotgun. Now, when you get a kill, this will grant you true sight for a short period of time, which means it's going to be very nice inside of PvP. Now, the shatter projectiles will weaken targets, and it also gets increased tracking. It's got a pretty interesting reload as well, where you like put this void crystal inside of it, and it reloads the entire magazine, not just one shot at a time. Now, this will be craftable, and it's going to include secrets you'll need to unlock as we head through the new exotic mission week by week, just like Choir of One last episode. Other than that, though, fellas, there was some chatter online that probably by the time this video is rolling out to you, that hopefully we'll get more confirmation on. Things like bug fixes, the ignition bug fix, where essentially our damage was scaling down with every consecutive ignition. These are definitely annoying bugs, and hopefully when Act 2 launches, we'll get a big sizable patch there that addresses them. With that being said, though, guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. Are you excited about Tomb of Elders? Do you like the fact that Bungie's returning to that coil form? I would love to hear your thoughts. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.